at the last minute. We have to have 5 in person.
Yes.
Six in person.
She can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Okay, hi, Abby. We're waiting to see if we get a 6th person so that we have a quorum.
Hey, hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all.
Now have a quorum, so.
Oh, good.
Okay, I'll let it work. Just,
I'll get you an agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 5:01.
Perfect.
You're right on time. Oh, good. All right, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. I guess the first thing to do is I guess I didn't send around last.
Minutes to everybody.
We sent the meeting minutes to everybody. And I have a motion well, actually, did anyone, I'll open up the discussion first. Does anyone have anything they wanted to change with the minutes? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
All right, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Awesome. And then apparently we need to do voice vote, right?
I think that's if they are on Teams, so we have one person, so technically, yes.
Okay, all right, so we'll just go around. You say, yay or nay for approving them. Yay.
Or
Yay.
Okay.
Abstain.
Okay. Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Me.
Yay.
Okay, we'll do it like that. Cool. All right, so in terms of the agenda, the first, I'm gonna change the agenda slightly. The first thing, work plan for the committee. Hal Turner doesn't have the time right now to put together something like that, due to some other issues. So we're gonna table that for the time being. So they were great questions to ask in terms of things, and hopefully we can still get Hal's, insight.
But some of the rest, I mean, I think we really do need to get plan for how we're going to move this along. So could we actually keep something, or maybe just appoint a small committee to try to put that together so we can build a roadmap?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's spend some time on that. That sounds like a good idea. So I'm gonna ignore everything I said. We're gonna still talk about the work plan. I think, yeah, spending some time doing that.
So I'd be happy to volunteer to be on a working group to do that.
Okay.
I've done that most of my professional life is building project plans.
Well, that's great. We will use that skill. And just like, so I have not been around for a little bit, so I'm gonna try and summarize the work that we have done so far as a committee. So we have assembled a committee that had lots of different constituencies represented. We have discussed, we have educated ourselves about vote centers, including learning about the technology, doing some additional kind of fact finding with other counties, et cetera, and also meeting with some constituent groups such as students. And we know that the election board would like us to submit some sort of report, and that report should include some ideas about how many vote centers would be our recommendation. That's pretty much all I know that we've done, right?
It's a pretty good overview, I think. I think that we briefly outlined what we were hoping to do in terms of more community group, research. But I think that like, I feel like at this point, we should probably try and start looking at an outline of some kind. I'm also happy to volunteer for that. We're in a less busy time of the year for me, so I have a little more capacity to help build some SFI.
There's still, I think, are two outstanding things that we wanted to, constituent groups that we wanted to get. One was in Unionville
Yeah.
and one was in Ellettsville. And so the Ellettsville one, I think, is
On my house.
on the books.
Yeah, for after 4th of July, is that what I,
I believe it was July 22nd.
July 22nd?
It's decided.
Okay,
And then there's the one with, on the west side of town where I was speaking with Highland Park Elementary. They said to wait until school comes back in session. Which that would be like the-
Unionville has that outdoor pavilion they just built that you could probably use.
Where is that?
At the school, they built an outdoor pavilion.
Oh, nice.
do you have the contacts out?
I have lots of contacts. Yes, Kylie would confirm that I have.
So,
Can you check with them, Dan?
Just throw a date at me and I will reach out to the principal.
Okay. Do you think that they would prefer to wait till after school starts or?
I have.
Well, let's just throw a date then.
Was that throwing? I don't necessarily think they would be, it may not be in the picture, it's in the picture.
Where, but where is it?
Oh, there it is, right. Looks, that thing, that looks like your Wi-Fi.
There's a amphitheater or Porter Circle Amphitheater.
oh, that's awesome.
It's like, this thing looks like your Wi-Fi signal on it.
Oh, that's what you're saying. I thought you were just saying.
What had to happen is for the principal to allow us to open the gate.
Oh, that's why
I'm assuming there would be, you would probably want sound system, but there is a sound system there.
well, okay, so
We
we
can also assist with.
They got 4 bars in.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have a meeting 6:25.
I won't be there for that.
Okay.
Is that a Wednesday?
Actually, I can be online. I keep forgetting.
I can pull up a calendar.
26, sorry, 26.
Yeah, we have a meeting on the 26th. We
On the
could
26th.
see if we could meet. Is that?
I have a son getting married 3 days later, so I'm not gonna commit to anything.
You know.
I want to keep married to the one I have and she may. She may be angry if I'm.
July 9th, no, July 10th. Sorry, I don't know. I keep picking Tuesdays. Sorry, voter.
I can ask about July 10th.
Yeah, if you can ask about.
Fair's the week before, right? So they're not all tied up at the fair.
Exactly.
Right.
So it might be, I mean, people will be coming back from vacation, but maybe we. some
It's
folks-
fair the week of July 4th. Does it include July 4th?
Yes,
It's a week.
it starts, I believe it starts like actually 29th, I think, is when the fair starts.
Yeah, the county, the county.
And it
fair.
goes that week. And I'm just saying that from the standpoint of Unionville people, there are a lot of 4-Hers out there.
Oh,
Yeah, because animals start going in on the 26th, projects go in on the 24th.
So I will reach out to the principal and see if we could set that up on 7/10. Roughly what time would you think we want to start that? We start at 5, that's early for people working for a living getting out there.
yeah, maybe we could do 5:30.
I would think later than that.
Six.
At least 6, yeah.
6. So we do,
Which I think that's what we kind of decided for the Ellisville one too, is wait, starting at 6.
Because they've got to drive from town to get out there.
So do we have committed to a date? What's the date again?
I will ask about 7/10.
July 10th, yeah.
Oh, we don't know yet. Okay.
No, I'll reach out to the principal tomorrow.
and then, yeah, any of the other dates that we have meetings on the books would be good, but maybe additional Wednesdays.
Yeah, and then we'll want to make sure with William Ellis for sure, but I'm almost positive we said July 24th was going to be the Ellisville one.
Excuse me.
All right, just to confirm, when we're meeting with those kind of constituent groups, do we have like an idea of what types of questions we'd like to ask them, or just kind of explain the concept and?
My proposal was, and I don't know, I had to skip a couple of meetings in there after that, so I don't know if the conversation evolved beyond that. But I think it was offered that we would have some sort of outline. Ask thing,
Okay.
but also to just get the general, like, a list of questions that we were specifically asking, that we were specifically hoping to include with it, whether that was like, tell us your votes and like your voting stories, and if you couldn't vote in
Right.
an election, like, what are the barriers to voting, and what do vote centers solve those barriers?
Yeah, that would be a good one. And then another one would be like, how do you find out about the logistics of voting? So like, how do you find out where to vote?
Right.
What's gonna be on your ballot, all those sorts of things. It's just so that we have an idea of how we need to keep that in mind. Those different groups.
We also need to, I mean, can't assume that they know what a vote center is.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, so I think a description of what a vote center is would be useful.
Do we know, so in the amphitheater, I'm assuming that we wouldn't have like a projection capability or anything.
There is projection.
Oh, great. Cause it could be that we might wanna make a little deck show.
Yeah. Theater?
Pretty sure they spent a chunk of money on that.
That's exciting. That's really, really cool.
What if, question?
I'm sorry to jump in if I'm interrupting anyone who's talking in person, but I'm happy to share the slides from the presentation my colleague and I gave last time as some of that, especially what you were just discussing about basic descriptions, that sort of thing. Feel free.
Yeah,
to
that would be great.
borrow
Yeah,
liberally from that.
Yeah.
yeah, I think we can pull from that. Anyway, but Alex was trying to think of a follow-up question too.
So like just asking like, do they have any, like, are they able to find the resources that they need to find a vote center or get precincts? Because I know like right now, even though we don't have a vote center yet, there are questions of just like, where do I even vote in the first place? So like, are they able to were they able to find a resource?
Okay, so kind of like, where do they find out about logistics for voting? And then also, were they able to, yes or no?
Yeah.
And would they like more? Like, I know that it can be kind of helter-skelter, like, sometimes you find out about voting because you see yard signs and you're like, oh, it must be time. And then, you know, you Google it and then you find the right place or something like that. That sounds good. But I'm gonna loop back to our original thing, which we wanted to create a working committee. I'm happy to also volunteer for the working committee on a work plan for our next couple of meetings. So that should give us, so what we're talking about is people to kind of like work on a project plan to kind of move us forward. But yeah, I think planning those 2 community meetings sounds good. And then I remember us talking about how, do we want to perhaps get on the NAACP agenda? Was that one of the other constituencies we're interested in? I remember someone talking about it.
Yes. Yeah, we talked
Okay.
about that a bit at the last meeting. They expressed interest in that. Thank you.
Well, I know the chair of that, so I can follow up and see if we can get on their agenda. And if not that, then a constituency meeting of some sort, maybe with their leadership. Does that seem like a good way?
At minimum.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was the chair who I talked to a couple weeks ago who had expressed interest.
Is that,
Oh, what'd you say? We missed you.
she spoke with the chair. I was asking, was that when Sheba was the chair, or was that since she stepped down?
Oh, shoot, I don't believe it. She's no longer the chair. Okay.
Did she
Oh,
she
it's
stepped
Sam.
down recently?
Yes,
Who is now?
Jim Sims.
Okay. Should give them.
Then it sounds like it would be a good idea to reconnect with multiple people there, I think is the way to go forward, like someone just mentioned a moment ago.
Well, I'm happy to take point on that in terms of asking Nakuiba and then also asking Jim Sims to see if we can get the group. Alex was asking if she could volunteer for a committee when she's, I think you're right now, you're a proxy. Can a proxy volunteer for a committee?
Roxy can do everything.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the committee.
So it was that you volunteered? Are you volunteering for the committee?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, Alex has volunteered as well, so, so yeah, work plan sounds good for that.
Okay, so I have down that Stacy, Daniela, Alex, and Alana will be this committee that will put together what our goal is and our steps to get there. Is that
Yes.
sort of what you're going to have at the end of it all?
We hope so.
Okay.
Yeah, because it would be, yeah, that would be nice to.
I would also like to add to that list if we can, just to like a very general bullet point outline of like the sections that we would want to present to the committee, so that we can have something that we can take notes on specifically to then like frame some of these meetings that we're having. Because I think that that is not always implied when you that was so weird.
At the same time, thank you.
That was so odd that that happened.
Yeah, just totally.
That was very strange.
Maybe the last committee's meeting.
Okay, I think we're back.
And we're back. Okay, so, the goal of this like kind of subcommittee is to develop a list of what is our goal, what are the steps that we need to take to get there, and then a basic outline of any deliverable that we'd like to create.
I was gonna ask a question about that if I may.
Yeah.
So the subcommittee that you want to create to, I guess, begin a work product?
Yeah.
As outline of
That's, yeah.
how to create it,
Right,
yes.
so an outline, I mean, is the outline not something that's already sort of been done over the course of many meetings? Like, don't we know the basic outline of what we want to say?
We do, we just don't have it codified anywhere yet, and I would like to just put it down on a piece of paper for all of us to be able to look at, because we have
But
talked about this.
I was really gonna suggest, rather than have a committee to prepare the outline, let one person author it. And then we can all amend it and provide it, we can study it and I just feel like there might be an extra step that we don't need. Especially if, you know, we're all sort of familiar with what we're doing here and, I mean, I think you have a basic sense of
Yeah.
what we want to say.
I also don't mind doing that
Yeah.
for the next meeting.
Let's just start with somebody's outline and then we can all mark it up. As long as we have it before the meeting so that we can review it before.
No, what I think is a good idea is to have that as part of the plan, so you can say this section needs to be done here, this, right, just being able to sort of chart out a plan to get to those sections and make sure that all the data is there. That's the only reason to do it sort of a priority, which I think is what you were thinking.
Yeah, which again, it could be that I was honestly just thinking about making sure that we have the sections that we want to cover and all of that. And that could be something that I provide before we meet as a smaller committee so that we can build a work plan before we come together, but that way we all can have access.
All I'm saying is that rather the document, however primitive, be authored by one person and edited by committee,
Absolutely.
rather than written by committee.
Yes.
No problem.
Well, you don't mind like an informal group kind of, a lot of people have been out at various different times, including myself. And I think it might help us to brainstorm together.
Except that that's what I thought these meetings were for.
They are,
I just think the first draft can come from one person, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
And that, yeah, that's fine, that's totally fine. And then we can
Yeah.
all brainstorm together and work it out.
And the only thing, other thing I'd ask is at least 48 hours notice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm happy to make myself available as part of that too. Just to kind of help with any additional brainstorming or other collaborative.
Yeah.
But not just to help figure out, I think one person can author it, but I think it also would help us. I think we're at a point in which we all have a shared understanding of what a vote center is. We have a shared understanding of, but we don't we might have a shared understanding of what are the decision points that the committee needs to make. But I think writing them down in a group would be really helpful.
We do have a document that exists already from a previous vote center.
Mhm.
Like.
Yeah,
from-
we have example ones, yeah.
Which I don't think that it's going to be exactly that, but I do think that in terms of structure and in terms of just getting things onto a paper and framing ways that we have this discussion, it'll be very easy to just pull that together.
I'm simply bringing up the principle of that people who do coding, they call agile programming, where two or more people sit at a computer, but one person drives.
Sure.
So, I mean, I would encourage you to bend her ear to review the document while she's writing it. Just, I don't know that we need to create a separate meeting to create the outline. I thought that's what these meetings are for, is to discuss things like that. And we can
That's cool.
formally amend them here too.
Sounds good. Okay, so we have a subcommittee. And we don't have a subcommittee. Right now. Daniela has volunteered to start the process of creating the work plan in collaboration with others on the committee. And so if you want to start that process, and then I forgot. Stacy will also use her background in project management to help us with any additional goal-oriented. Does
To
that
build it out, so that we,
To build it out.
yeah, to make sure that we actually are following through with what we need to do. Yeah.
does that sound like a good path forward for everybody?
Yes.
Cool.
We can have everybody's expertise this way.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, and so we have 2 community meeting, potential dates. And then so we wanted to reach out to the NAACP. Are there any other constituency groups that we wanted to talk to?
I know we said doing like a team meeting with, PACE, not PAC. With
Oh, with
PACE
PACE.
at IU once school comes back into session.
Okay,
So like we could do that probably in September, right before the November election. And then I know that the voter registration office has said something about kind of going out and helping get students registered at that time too. And we make it like a 3 groups into one meeting.
okay, so the other one is like a more formal meeting with PACE, because we had invited students, but we didn't invite like the PACE leadership. So that's potentially 4 different constituencies we'd like to make sure that we talk to before completing work on it.
Yes, I do think that the meeting with PACE that we were talking about was going to be on campus. That was a large reason why we wanted to do as an additional one, was so that we could go to campus.
We also talked about having a general meeting for anybody who doesn't fall into a special category,
Mhm.
like an open public meeting, possibly at the Nat U Hill room.
Yeah.
Because the others,
Yeah, I like that idea, but I also feel like it would be helpful if we already had a draft of what we were working on for people to give feedback on, than meet in this kind of beginning. Or just because people would have something to kind of be like, I'm coming here to give this sort of feedback. So I'd kind of delay that one till after the one that we have in the fall.
Do you know what month PACE will schedule it?
I'm assuming September because school starts in
Right.
end of August, but
Yeah,
we want to probably get in pretty early because
Yeah.
registering students to vote at least.
I mean, it's not too soon to talk to them. I thought in PACE last fall, it's not too soon to talk to them.
yeah, definitely. But I think kind of for this open meeting, if we had
It was for the students to be able to come and.
yeah.
Right, but they could promote it. They would promote it to their students and to others.
Yeah, we're just talking about 2 different meetings. One is the meeting. So we were talking about the PACE meeting, which definitely we want to do in September. And then we were also talking about an open feedback
Like a
meeting.
community forum that is in a larger location and that has more capacity than this room.
Specifically for students or,
Specifically for the community, like the broader community that don't fall into specific interest groups.
anybody who wants to hit us again.
Yep.
One of these-
Wants to make sure that they are being listened to, yeah.
Yes, that's, kind of just an open, that which we could all obviously promote through all the meetings that we've gone to previously. Sounds great. Do we want to move on to new business? People looking.
Do we need to do something formal to make a subcommittee? We need a motion on that.
I'm torn, because I think we're not making a subcommittee. I think Daniela and you are sort of agreeing, well.
To just
Danielle
take
is,
that task on. Nice.
Yeah.
That's totally
I
good with me.
think that's where we kind of,
Sounds great.
yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah, that we're happy to help her have a meeting about it, as well. I think that was how the process that we felt most comfortable with. So we can have some sort of update about that at our next meeting, which is on the 28th. Yeah. And I'm happy to meet in between, maybe on the Wednesday. And if you need additional people to talk to. All right. So I think we don't need to do anything formal. So in terms of other new business to talk about. Ralph sent along a lot of really great stuff, as well as we have this formal report. Kylie's. Yeah. I guess I'm gonna like kind of turn to you, Ralph, and I know you are trying to take notes at the same time, but are there things that really stood out from those reports that you really wanted us to highlight? In terms of what you've heard from the other counties?
From the ones who answered our real questions, my general sense was they really like it. They couldn't, one of them said, I couldn't imagine going back to the way it used to be. So that was encouraging that there's life on this decision. Most of them, I think, have electronic voting sheets. Wayne County is the only one that has the paper ballots that we do. So that's why we asked them specifically about equipment. And it seemed to be much the same story that we were hearing from the Hart folks when they came to us. And then as kind of the follow-up, well, what I tried to do was before I asked the questions, I looked on the websites just to get a feel for how they were set up nowadays. And so as I was doing that, I was kind of struck by the range of places that they chose as vote centers. Many of them were the obvious, a community center or a school, or their equivalent election headquarters or something like that. But occasionally it would be like a Hampton Inn or something like that. So you just you go with what's in your community, I guess was what I figured out. And then I used just the population. So I had the number of vote centers in each county, and I used the Secretary of State's number of how many registered voters they had last year, and figured out then that number of like how many voters per vote center did they end up with. And it was kind of a range, actually. There were some of them were like really big, and some of them had they had such a small number of voters that like Cass County had 8,000 registered voters and 6 vote centers. So they came, whoa, you can just walk out your back door. Well, or maybe not. But anyway, so one thing I didn't do, because it didn't dawn on me until just now, if we took our number of registered voters, which is 77,000, and divided it by the average voters per vote center, we would have about 23 vote centers in Monroe County. It seemed like less.
Oh,
Precincts do we have?
It's fewer than we have now. Well, we have 30 some.
We have 29 locations.
29 locations. So we don't have to go with just changing 6 of them, but yeah.
Well,
that's just the numbers.
If I could ask a question, is the number of centers the only relevant figure, or is it also the number of lines that can handle voters within each center?
Right.
In other words, you can have, I just went to the CVS downtown, there's 1 or 2 people on duty at their pharmacy, and the one on the east side has got a dozen people working,
Yeah.
So do you have a sense of how many of those vote centers had, multiple lines that could have people? Because maybe that's a concern as well, maybe we can consolidate some vote centers in denser places and just have a bigger.
we did have staff, which does give me some idea of how many
Yeah, it's a big figure.
So I think staff might help us understand it.
And they did say that they usually right-sized after a while, right? They went with a lot more to begin with and
I mean,
then
we'll,
scaled down. And we'll learn that too, so.
it'll be helpful to figure out what is the number of people in each vote center. So we have a sense, because that's a telltale figure.
So, I mean, that was just like, I had been thinking, well, we're aiming for 5 vote centers. And after 5, the numbers, no, we can think bigger than 5. So that was, I guess, thinking for that reason, interesting.
I think it would be an appealing number if we could say, if to having our current number of precincts. Like, yeah, I think that would be something that the public would find appealing if we knew we could cut the number of work centers in half. But that's a completely arbitrary number that I'm pulling out of my ear.
The one thing that I did notice from the report is they all had different metrics for how many vote centers they had, and it was not the same for any of them. They had different things that they were thinking about particularly, but they did draw into a lot of the things that we could imagine. Geography, so how physically far away they were. Total population, total voting population, the ability to have a location in an ideal location, et cetera. Were all things that were in there, but there seemed to be other factors depending on it, whether they have a student population or those things. So I think that I also did that exact same math that you did on my way here. And I also found that it was helpful to think about it as 22 and then, imagine, all right, where could we think about some of our populations specifically and develop perhaps different plans. Like one could be we could present multiple plans to the election board. One could be, you could go to a full 29 to 29 SWIP. You could go to right sizing, kind of what we've seen, the 22 vote centers, or you could cut more and here are the issues and then just have them choose between those options. Which
I think, we can't tell them what to do.
well, yeah,
We can say, here are
There are some options.
4 options.
yeah, well, I was thinking like the options thing is kind of helpful.
Yeah, and then they might want to talk with Kylie and say, okay, could we actually put a vote center in this location? The other thing that they did was they had early voting required by law to be for a month before election day, but they had that at only one location. But then the week before election, several of them actually opened up some of their vote centers to take the load off of election day.
Yeah.
And it certainly seemed to me that at early voting, it was that last week was when most of the people were showing up to vote.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that, we might try to. So we're not responsible for that, but it's something that the election board could consider.
It might be a
is
recommendation.
having like a couple of, just for the week before election, having a few locations.
I know that there's been a history of looking at what's called satellite early voting locations.
Yeah, there has been a history of looking at possibly having 2 to 3 early voting locations that last week before the election day.
Yeah, now I want to make sure that we're in scope because vote centers, we are the vote center committee and vote centers only exist on election day.
Correct.
But I mean, I think that's
who?
just the charge of the committees, like we're the vote center committee. That's the name for
Okay.
vote centers. They're the area.
I do think though, and sorry to interrupt partway.
No, go
through,
ahead.
We've talked before about how it would be a best practice to think about what access voters need. And from my perspective, I don't think it would make sense to talk only about election day because we're talking about possibly reducing in-person locations for election day. So I view it as part of our committee scope to at least make recommendations about what we see as interrelated counterbalancing types of access that would be needed, including on early voting. Should we write a 100-page report about early voting locations? No, that would be outside of the scope. But if we are recommending that if we're observing that some of these other places that have gone to a vote center model have expanded early voting options or that that's what people would need in Monroe County. I view it as part of our scope of work. Happy to hear others' thoughts on that. I also would challenge us. I'm in the us. I would challenge us all to think about eligible voters as well, because I don't think we are thinking of our whole universe as just registered voters. I understand that some of the legal requirements refer to registered voters, but in our imagination, especially because this would be a forward-looking change, it wouldn't be a change just for one election. It would be a change possibly for a long time. So I would really encourage us to not be constrained just by the registered voters number. And I know Stacy and others have mentioned this more artfully than I'm saying now, but you know, we really should think about what our strongest recommendations are, not about cutting as our first instinct.
I think that's a good point. And yeah, and I think that with these constituency meetings, we're asking them about their voting experience in general, not their election day voting experience. So I think it's within some scope to recommend some amount of it. I think it's just also just being very clear that we understand that there is a difference statutorily between the two, even though they use the same equipment. So
I have a question for you. So do you have a sense, especially for Tippecanoe and St. Joseph counties, those were the ones that stood out to me as having a significant student population. Others, please speak up if there are other places on the list that you think would fall into that, or not just students, other populations too, that you think we need to learn more about. But to those in my mind, I felt like your findings made me curious about the student voter experience in those two counties. And if students are able to, has the vote center model helped them to have more options like we anticipate could happen for students in our community? But what is it like for them? Because the answers from the local election authority, whom I highly respect, but they were very dry, sort of literal answers to your questions or non-answers to some of your questions. And I feel like we need a little bit more there, not from every single county, because I don't know that we have capacity to do that, but are there a few places we can zero in on where the local league or others may be able to provide some perspective to us?
Excuse me, what was the other county besides St. Joseph that you mentioned?
Tippecanoe.
Tippecanoe.
Delaware? Home of Ball State?
Right, that would be good.
We should also check with them, and maybe Vigo.
Good idea.
yeah, I mean, we can move in that direction, but I think also I would prioritize personally the views of our current, like talking to a current PACE group over those other groups which do exist in different contexts. Since I did work at Purdue, I do know the version of their PACE, and I could definitely reach out to them and they could give the feedback of what they're seeing. They have other issues over there, most specifically the student ID vote issue is a much larger problem at Purdue, which I don't know if you know, no longer has vote IDs physically.
Their student ID doesn't meet the state requirements.
Both, no, and it doesn't exist in physical form.
Oh.
They don't have one. I see, that was a very good one. Yeah, they don't have a physical, like students are not issued student ID anymore.
I did not know that was a thing that was starting to.
They have like an app.
Yeah,
They can
it's basically a digital ID for them now.
I don't think I've ever felt so old as I do right now.
I used to use it.
No, Purdue students. I'm just saying that like which adds like a very large barrier to voting.
Yeah.
Where you can't, where not only do you not have an ID that meets state regulation, you don't have a period possibly from that to help you secure
Fascinating.
one
How has that been happening there?
since the pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But it's just questions, it's like, I mean, because like I use my student ID for like, I don't use it to vote, but I use it for so many things.
Well, yeah, I wonder if IU is ever going to even like think about doing that, because that is fascinating. I don't know what the long term, like if the society is going to shift for that, or if that is something that is just going to be like physical IDs are so tied to so much we do.
So 20th century.
It is, I know, it's so old school.
I do know like the kids these days, I know when so I work at a library and most of them there's like an IU app, which has the same thing as like a version, a digital version of it, and they carry around that versus like I very rarely am able to actually scan someone's library card these days at the library. Most people have like either a picture of it or they have the ID one, which is better for
You're
scanning.
not gonna have the cool lanyards anymore. That's so weird.
I know, that's like so what I remember.
If you go back to drop an ad in Williamington Intramural Center.
Anyway, but this is all to say that like that's an additional thing with
Yeah, they might have different.
different issues or concerns. But anyways, but I'd like to focus more on like for the long theme, we still have physical IDs. You know, we have a different voting population in terms of there are majors that are more and less likely to vote. If you go into it, engineers are very unlikely to vote. So statisticians are also unlikely to vote. Majors that are likely to vote are education. I can't think of another one at this
Well, I
moment.
hope it's political science.
I would hope it's science, but anyway, so basically your what majors you have on your campus, I think affects your turnout possibilities.
Can I just mention something? I mean, by next year, the state is requiring real ID for all kinds of travel. So, I mean, I'd be surprised. I mean, Purdue students do still have driver's licenses, right?
Or state IDs.
Or state ID, something that conforms to the real ID standard. I mean, there's still going to be some kind of ID. I mean, do we feel like students need to have their student ID as well in order to be able to?
If their driver's license is from Illinois.
Yes.
have that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the main thing is we have so many students, even here in Monroe County, that come in with their state ID.
Got it.
And then they have to pull out either their passport or their student ID in
Oh,
order to
interesting.
vote here because it's not a Indiana issued
Right.
ID.
So it's less, it's a,
A lot of
Sorry.
students don't drive as well. A lot of students
well.
don't drive as
yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't, full disclosure, I did not grow up in Indiana, so I grew up in California where it's a little bit different. But is it that they need to like two forms of ID just for two forms of ID, or is it one with your address and one?
So it has to be an Indiana issued or a federal issued
Fascinating. Okay.
identification.
That's
So
good to
it would
know.
either have to be a passport or it would have to be a Indiana driver's license.
Or an
So we had a student that came in with a Texas driver's license because that's where she's from. And we couldn't accept it because that's not a Indiana or federal issue.
And a passport that lists you in a different address doesn't help either, does it?
Yeah, it does, because the address on your ID does not have to match what is on your voter registration. So if they had a passport, it's that, as long as it has their picture.
Or not that you live
Yeah.
there. I see.
And it's
So with real ID being nationwide,
Mhm.
right? So it's a federal law and it's the same requirements for everyone. Wouldn't a Texas? It's
No, because you can't prove that you're living in this precinct. And so if you have a state ID, or if you have a school ID, then you are at least going to school
Right.
for a extended period of time.
If they'll take a passport that doesn't have your right ID, but they won't take a Texas
Yeah.
ID that has the same
If it's an
requirements as the real
yeah,
ID.
so if it's an ID, it has to be state issued. If
Right.
it's a passport, then it can be
It's
federally.
Fascinating because
I
they
know.
are all the same requirements.
I know, it's
nationwide.
very-
That was the whole point of.
Yeah.
Of real ID.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just interesting that the address is not part of it.
I know, because so on those, as long as it has your picture, your name, an expiration date, and either state or federally issued. For requirements.
That's very interesting to me.
And also, by the time any of our recommendations take effect, real ID will be in effect as of May 7th next year.
Yeah, and speaking of which, one thing I did want us to consider when we were thinking about the 22 vote center thing is anything that we adopt will happen 2 years in the future. So we should plan for some population growth.
Yeah, everything will go into effect in 26 if it is adopted.
Yeah, so just like when we think about the 22, that would be if the election was held today.
Mhm.
That is our current vote count. But if we wanted to say, imagine, I don't know, like that we've grown at a a similar rate or a larger rate in terms of our
I
plan?
can check
Mhm.
from what the registered number from this primary versus what the cutoff date in October will be. And we could use that to see how much it grows within that in between election period.
Yeah, just kind of agree on like maybe like a 5% growth or
Yep.
something like that. I agree, we don't know where it's gonna be. Like, I personally think that Ellettsville, the way that they're growing is gonna be like really dense in the next 5 years. So I think that, that might be something to consider. Yeah, and the growth from the south. Anyway. So any other things from the reports?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know the study committee is gonna meet with PACE in the future. What we've been looking into. We discussing with them from like a IU perspective or from a student perspective.
Good question.
I know when Pearl came from PACE, we kind of talked more of like a student perspective.
Yeah.
So that we can get input from them on whether or not they want vote centers, even though we know majorly what their answer will be, but we want to make sure that everybody is in like a vast agreement from the student perspective.
That's a great question though, because there has been brought up that it is hard to get voting places on campus.
It is
So,
very difficult to
is
get
it-
anywhere on campus.
And I don't know if this is within the scope of the committee. I don't know if this is something that would have to happen with beyond our time with this issue, but like, is it worth it for us to talk to campus officials and in this phase as well on
Yes.
like, if
Yeah.
we tell you, you only have to have one vote center on campus and it just has to be one, as long as it's centralized, like, I feel like that must be part of the discussion that we haven't brought up yet.
Yeah.
I'd say,
I don't know who that would be.
I want to say that's a definite, we do need to, because, I mean, even for this election, I tried 4 different locations on campus and all 4 got turned down. So that's why we ended up with 29 locations instead of 30.
oh,
So,
Who did the turning down?
each of the, department heads for each different department that we tried using.
Because some of the students, I mean, the student testimony that we got was that the where they were voting was completely inaccessible to them, which is absolutely fair. But
Yep.
like, if we can't get on campus, then would we even be able to solve that with that center?
And right
The
now,
library, I'm just
Yeah.
curious, oh man,
yep,
this is funny, I would just say.
yep, we tried library, we tried, the Marching Hundred Hall. We tried the auditorium. And then the other location was the IU football complex.
What about any of the dorms?
None of the dorms were accessible because they said that we wouldn't be able to use them for the May election.
In
We would-
26?
No, for
Oh,
this,
sure.
yeah, they said we would have only been able to use them in the fall and we can't. We have to have them for the spring and the fall.
Yeah, that is a metric that we have to consider with locations is, I think generally as a committee, we want it to be as least confusing as possible where vote centers are. And so it needs to be a location that hopefully could happen in both the May and the October period so that it's not always hopping around.
I mean, they have to, by state law, they have to be, if you have it at one location in the primary, it has to be in the same location in the general.
Yeah, so, yeah, which I guess the timing of the election makes that challenging.
So was there any vote like precinct on campus at all for this?
EMU is the only one, but we always get complaints about there because everybody either has a complaint about parking or the chute is not set up correctly, and then we have people campaigning right outside the door.
Yep.
And then there's also people that have issues with handicap accessibility there as well.
So in terms of if this committee were to meet, or if some members of the committee, because I don't know if it needs to be a full committee discussion. Like, who would we meet with? Like, would it be with the people who coordinate rentals?
Every time that we get a hold of anyone to have any location on campus, they send us to whoever is in charge of that building.
Gotcha. So it's
So
Like a response.
It's not just one person that we get a hold of. They
It
just
is
send us to like,
based on, okay, that's fascinating.
I mean, I there's been conversation about, with, student groups and RPS about, giving candidates access to the dorms, which they've traditionally been locked out of for obvious reasons. But I think that this is on the radar of RPS.
Yeah.
And that if we expand, if this committee reaches out to them and says, listen, we need you to think even bigger now that they manage dozens of buildings with lobbies, with special buildings. I'm thinking of a building that used to be a library in Ashton Center. Like whatever happened to that, maybe they turn it into residences, maybe not. So there's got to be a building under the control of RPS. And just for what it's worth, the May primary in 2026 is during exam week and not after graduation, like it was this year. That's going to help us persuade them. I mean, we can try to get, first, if we can get a vote center working in 2026 through in a dorm and show that it works, then maybe we can persuade IU to permanently make available or to figure out a way to make sure that students aren't disenfranchised in years when the primary comes after graduation, where the dorms are locked and students move out the Saturday before.
So I want us to like, as we move into out of a precinct world and into a vote center world, keep in mind that people aren't voting where they live. So the other big constituency are people who work during the day at IU and are voting on their lunch hour.
Yep.
So like, it's less a student location anymore as much as it's at one of the largest employers. So let's just think about IU as an employer.
Yep.
As
The amount of traffic that's gonna be flowing through the IU vote centers.
Yeah, so like, you know, we might see a growth there, but it's gonna be probably from the people who are voting at their employee in the same way that we might have growth if we had a vote center at the hospital.
Right, and if it isn't on campus, then is there a partner that's right next to campus that can become a vote center so that people don't have to try and get to Bloomington North when they're living on campus?
Correct, yeah.
I could also say that the 2027 city election will also conform to 2026. So the next two elections that we would have to do, they're both going to be during final exam week and not after graduation.
That is a good point. So maybe there is gonna be some possible opportunities into the future.
At least when it comes to talking to IU, I think that's going to, we don't have to worry about that issue for the next couple of elections. We can test it out and see how they like it.
Yeah, and I would say that you didn't have this strong of a relationship with Pace last time, so maybe we can hopefully, with Kylie as our new elections person, we can have a little bit better of a relationship with the combination that these are going to be during exam weeks, so hopefully we might be able to make an argument to IU possibly.
It's a good point also to mention that IU is not really monolithic, it's separate fiefdoms. And so you know, like if none of the lists that you mentioned included RPS.
Yeah, I think RPS is a good partner and for that in the future, but I also, if in the thing, if we're trying to think about what would work better for it as an employer, so the problem with the IMU is it doesn't have parking, so if you are employed here, it's kind of hard to hoof it over.
But we had that stirring letter from that person who had to vote a provisional ballot because she worked at IU and she couldn't get from her work to her.
Exactly, yeah, no, it would be closer for sure.
Yeah.
But just thinking about like an IMU location is not a student voting location. It's an employer.
But it's the bus services there, students, what's the point of the union if students don't go there? It is certainly a student voting location. It could be, just they either don't
I
know about
agree.
it.
I thought we were thinking about how to
Yeah.
increase access for students, not to the exclusion of other people, like people who work at IU,
Right.
but I thought this whole conversation and the student input from a couple months ago was to also increase access for students.
Right.
No, I agree. I agree with both of those. I think I'm just saying that the constituency that votes at the IMU will not always be just students. Like it will often be people who vote during the day. And so our goal is to increase access for a lot of constituencies. Yeah. And I think that's what I was trying to say is that it's I think you're right. We can be very monolithic about IU and say this is where the students go, but in a vote center model.
It's gonna end up
It's-
being
right.
students and faculty and staff members.
Well, and in a vote center model, like this, if we had phone center, at least one on campus or a few that were around campus, it
Right.
will just benefit everyone, right?
Yeah.
Because no matter who is on campus for whatever reason, they will have access to those centers that they wouldn't have had before.
Correct.
No, I think I think the two are doable within it, but I think it's, you want to think about both constituencies.
Yes.
When you're thinking of it, you won't, because you really can't, in a vote center model, depend upon people going to one location.
Right.
Can I also suggest one more thing? Crosstown Plaza, it's owned by IU, hasn't been torn down, at least for the short term. There's a big space here right between Pizza X and the subway there. It used to be Lenny's, has not been repurposed, at least according to this photo. I don't remember what's there now. But if it's open, that might be an ideal vote center location to test. And it's got parking.
Yeah.
So and it's close to students. I mean, it checks all our boxes.
Do you know?
It's ground floor and there's curb cuts. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not against like a location. I think what I'm trying to be is like thinking about like things like Crosstown Plaza or things like that, where it's physically located on bus lines, but also possibly able to be used in other ways. It's like to be thinking about both constituencies.
Well, and a proposal to a group that is ultimately going to vote on this and implement this in a way that we are not making sure that we know all locations that we can suggest that we may have talked to some administrators about so that they already know that that is in our recommendation. Is helpful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, both as a replacement for the IMU
Yeah.
location, but also
Or as
Or in addition, yeah.
yeah, interesting. Anyway, so this has been a little bit more free flowing of meeting. I think I think we've had a good discussion about the info that Ralph has pulled together. I don't know if if you hear anything else, or do we have any additional questions since you have the emails of the folks? We don't have any follow-ups from these other counties.
I think so. They all said that they would be happy to answer any additional questions, but I think it kind of gives us a flavor for what's out there and do something without killing anybody.
Cass County will be a good one to get a hold of for equipment because they use hard equipment and their paper ballots. So they use the same process as what we would if we were to transfer over to a vote center.
Which county?
Cass. Yeah, they are hard equipment and they are paper ballots.
The main city.
They are on my list. And when she said.
They're a small one.
But I asked her, I said, oh, I didn't realize you were Hart. Would you answer these questions? And she replied that they didn't use they didn't have the print on demand ballots.
Yeah. They do. I'm actually in a seats program with her right now. So every other week we go up to Muncie and I'm getting certified in elections, technology and security and elections from Ball State University. So me and her see each other quite often. And we were actually just talking this last Friday about our equipment. And she's like, I hate our equipment, but love it at the same time. And I'm like, we just love it. So I'm like, please don't tell me that you hate it because then I'm going to start hating it.
Pretty sure she said to me, I don't understand what you need a printer for. We have a little thing that prints the slip that they take over to the voting machine. That's what she said. What I understood. She said,
Yeah, so
I
think-
like re-answer her.
yeah, I think that they might be getting ready to transfer over to the Duo, which we've kind of talked about the Duo a couple of times in our office. You walk up to the machine, it's basically like a touch writer except for everybody, and you click on the ballot, who you're wanting to vote for, and then it prints your ballot and then you go scan it.
Oh, so that kind of.
And so I think they are getting ready to transfer over to that, so that might be kind of where the confusion is, but
Okay.
Yeah.
But we can rely on Kylie to get information.
Cass County is really awesome. They're easy to work with too.
All right, so yeah, so like maybe some additional info from Cass County. And then I guess we're just gonna plan to meet here for our next meeting in 2 weeks. And with some kind of ideas about work plan, you know, to kind of discuss, if you guys can send that out like 48 hours before the meeting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like we mentioned for the committee to review it, but I'm kind of like thinking we'll have that update from you guys. And then I think that's gonna be our biggest agenda item for our next meeting.
Sounds great.
Great.
Cool.
Awesome. So next meeting will be in 2 weeks, so
The
26th.
26th.
Something else that I just was going to do, I'm just gonna make if Ami could send the slides from the last week that we had, I will also just make slides with the questions that we want to ask that we discussed earlier. If that way we just have them and can edit them before we actually go to anywhere.
Sounds great.
Cool. All right,
I move we adjourn.
Second,
we are adjourned.
what is the deadline